Greetings. Glad to be here on LinkedIn Live today, where we're going to talk about people, process, and technology. In the 1960s, management psychologist Harold Levitt laid the groundwork for what has become the Golden Triangle: people, process, and technology. That's the Golden Triangle, or a heart. I don't know which way. Sometimes the triangle is represented as a three-legged stool, demonstrating how balance among the three is necessary to maintain stability. If any of the legs is overemphasized, the stool falls over. And today I have some great guests to share some talk about people, process, and technology with you. Uh, I have Denise, or as we call her, Dee Burgoyne, who's a human services professional with a rich background in executive level leadership roles across healthcare, not for profit, Fortune 500 companies. And she specializes in workforce strategy and leadership development issues. And her book, 28 Ways of Compassion, A Guide to Transformation and Leadership, shares how human connections enhance employee, customer, and patient experiences and impact our daily lives. Joining us to discuss this is also David Mainville, who's the CEO of Gnavia, which is a software as a service or SaaS product used for assessing, designing, and documenting business processes. So you see how this is working out now. There's the people side with Dee. Here's the process side with David. He's been in the IT industry for over 40 years and has an extensive technical marketing and management experience, making him adept at bridging the gap between IT and business. David is passionate, I know that, about processes and their pivotal role in organizational efficiency and digital transformation.
Thanks, Roy.
And you're welcome, David. And we also have Bec`ce Roman. Hi, Bec`ce. Bec`ce is an experienced business transformation strategist with demonstrated success and thought leadership. Her innate passion for delivery of digital transformation and operational optimization is married to her marketing and business strategy background. Bec`ce has expertise in both technology and marketing and refined capabilities in developing and implementing a transformational strategy and operational footprint that drives business value and operational excellence. So we've got some good, high-quality folks here for you, representing people, process, and technology. And I, of course, am the CEO of 𝗥cie𝘆 𝗔𝗶𝗶 LLC and a fellow of the Institute for Digital Transformation. And before we get into the deeper conversation, do we basically agree with the premise that people, process, and technology is the right order in which we should talk about these things? Dee, let's start with you.
Absolutely, without a question. Processes come from people, and people are the reason for the processes. We definitely need the processes to help us be more efficient and more consistent in the way we do things, and to utilize the skills and the talents and the experience that the people bring to those processes. But people are the beginning of processes and the end of processes and the reason for everything, and the cause of most of the problems.
And the cause of most of the problems, right?
Or joys.
There you go. Well, and part of solving those problems is defining the processes and making sure that they're efficient and correct. And that's where, David, let me let you talk about that for a little bit.
Sure. I mean, I definitely agree. It all starts with people. People is everything. But I also think it's kind of an iterative thing. So as you're looking at the people aspects, getting people on board and getting them interested in the transformation or getting them engaged, you also have to engage them in developing the processes, and you have to engage them when you're rolling out the technology, executing the processes, sustaining those processes over time. So even though you start with people, you kind of have to revisit it all the time through that golden triangle.
Absolutely. And Bec`ce, what do you think about this relationship as we're starting off? How do people lead the way?
I absolutely agree with David. It has to, I mean, when we're looking at it as a stool, all of the three pillars have to be the same height. And they're not all going to receive equal weight in terms of decision making and what intuitive order they need to go in. But one of the most important things too, I think, is like the golden triangle, it is a little dated. And our businesses, our people, our workforces and the technology that supports it are complex. So context is everything. People, process, and technology is a very simplistic starting point. So it's a very intuitive thing to use as a way to scratch the surface. But I think the most important thing too is to really call attention to the fact that all of these things, all three, people, process, and technology, exists in an ecosystem, in a complex system that we need to know, understand, and learn about before we can go implement anything for either or for any three of these components. So I think that that's the important thing, is really understanding the environment that each of these three things need to be successful.
Complex adaptive systems that we live in now, and we're going to come back to some of the recent changes that have kind of maybe put a wobble in the stool as we talk about those basic three things. So, David, following on from what you said, we've all seen this. We see how people ignore or shortcut processes. There's a great graphic from years back that shows a gate across a path and how the people have worn away the path around the gate. If they're too difficult or complicated, people are going to find ways through them, around them. When organizations are working to design processes, which is one of the things that you do, how important is it to bear people and how they actually do things in mind? And how can we avoid creating convoluted processes?
Oh, totally. I mean, just following on to what Becky was saying, it is a complex system, and I like taking more of a design thinking approach where every part of the problem is iterative, right? So, when we used to build processes, the first thing we'd like to do is understand what people's perspective of the current processes are. So, are they working for the people? Where are the gaps? Where are the pain points? And by engaging people that way, you're also building a sense of urgency for actually correcting those problems and engaging in ongoing organizational change. So it all starts with people and listening to people. If you don't listen to people, I remember sitting at another one of these panel discussions, and someone was saying how they went and developed a number of processes for their organization. I said, "Go on, tell me more about it." And they said, "Well, it was great. We got in a room, and me and two other colleagues, and we built all of these processes for the company." And I said, "Oh, you just built them in isolation like that?" And that's what they did. They built a bunch of processes in isolation and then expected people to take ownership of these processes and feel like they're part of it. So engaging people as you're building processes is probably the most important thing. Understand where their pain points are, understand, where and how you can make things better for them. And then make sure that, you've got all those rules and responsibilities and handoffs, I should say, understood. Without doing that, you're never going to get buy-in. And it doesn't stop there, right? Once you've designed that process, you got to deploy it. So you need the right education, you need the right training, you need the right governance around the process and feedback loops so you can continually improve the process.
Agreed. And so let me go back to D for a second here and say, do you feel that compassion plays a role in the business and technology process design? How can we include compassion, which is, of course, one of your big topics, without giving up the necessity for process adherence? Because if we don't have process adherence, things are going to work in unexpected ways. We're not going to get the outcomes we're looking for. So how do we build that in?
Well, I absolutely think that there's a place for it. There's no question. It reminds me of a commercial back in the 90s, I think. Um, can you do all these things without the people involved? Yes, and we've seen some of the results. There was a commercial that said, "Can you breathe without a tic tac?" And the answer was, "Of course." But we don't recommend it. And the people are such an integral part of the process and the communication. And I like the word compassion is such a scary word for people. And it's hard to wrap your head around what that word means. It means much more than a feeling, and it means much more than what the dictionary will spout out a lot of times about pity and pain and um, sympathy. It's to me, it's about communication that's required for these processes to be built and designed, as you said, David,
Mhm.
and also to have that iterative process where people are continually involved. But communication alone is not the answer. If it does not include caring. So communication with caring and compassion creates the connection that we need. We talk a lot about connectivity and connecting and can you hear me now? But when you can connect with people, you can get so much more done. And I think the challenge is people, many times leaders and team leaders and even individuals don't know how to connect within a team. So it goes beyond the word compassion, which is, like I said, a scary word. Uh, we talk about 28 ways of compassion, but it could truly be 28 ways of connection. How do we connect? It doesn't take a lot of time. Sometimes it takes a second, but it builds that trust and that feeling of being seen that allows people to not only to two things. One, question, that's so important in the design of processes, but also ask questions along the way. You remind me, David, there was I've done a lot of work with disability and accommodation and things like that, and there's an expression that's used in that field about trying to accommodate a person with a disability.
Mhm.
And I remember a case where we had an employee at Spiegel, which was banks and banks of customer order people taking orders. We had a young man come in who was a quadriplegic. So we all ran off into this room and we're talking about the design of what we were going to do to accommodate this wheelchair. And there was, engineers and all these other people with their pencils in their pockets. And Mark stopped me in the hallway and said, how about if we just put four, he was a really tall guy, fell off a roof. How about if we just put 4 1-inch blocks, one under each table leg, and lift the desk up? And there's an expression for that. Nothing about me without me. If we can include an expression like that, nothing about me without me, when we are designing processes, if it affects the people and we go beyond what is this process for and think, who is it for? That is the compassionate piece that we're looking for, the connection and the communication that will make things gel. So is there a
Thank you.
place? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Good question here or comment from Nora. We saw a great deal of compassion and connection in the early days of COVID. The pandemic brought people to a different place. Where do you see things now, 4 years later? Is the people focus better, worse, or the same? That gets into a whole realm of questions about how we design not only the technological and human interworkings of the business, but things like location, hybrid work, remote work, all of those things. And it's a huge question. Does one of you want to take that on a little bit and try to illuminate the question for Nora?
I think one of the things that um, the all the organizations that had to make rapid reaction and responses to that really pivotal shift in and rapid shift in how people are working and where people are working is that it made them realize that there has to be accountability for the nuances of the way people work in the systems, the processes, how we access them, the policies, the governance, all of these different things, all of these different components that feed into successful organizations and operations. One of the things though that I think is still struggling, but we're getting much better at is understanding that one size fits all is not always appropriate for every corner of the business and how we work. And I think giving that flexibility and accounting for the nuances of being a human in different environments, different work environments, even though we're all working for the same organization, is very, very critical. So understanding where that flexibility is expected from employees. So from a employee retention and attracting good talent perspective. That's really important. And then also understanding that there is a lot of ability for us to give humans some flexibility in certain areas and monitor and govern more heavily in others. And understanding where that is really makes us need to understand the business, the technology at play, and where we want to go. So I think businesses still have a long ways to go, but I think that early understanding of we're going to have to throw away some of the traditional rule book, right? The set of rules that worked when we were all within the same four walls is no longer going to work. So I think what we have seen is the awareness and understanding now that we are going to be probably in a decade-long redesign of business processes, governance, and regulatory conversations, policy writing, rewriting, et cetera, that is now going to revolve around the fact that we want to have a central a center of gravity and a central level of understanding about what really matters to our business and where we can extend this flexibility for all of the different working ways and working environments. So I think that that was the biggest shift we've seen, is that shift in culture of we want folks to have flexibility and to be able to work in a capacity that works for them while falling within our policies and guidelines. But I think we have a long ways to go to actually implementing that to true success in most organizations. So yeah, I think a little bit of movement. I think we have a long ways to go, but a lot of that is there's a lot of investment to be made. One of the major things that I saw across all of the organizations I have worked with over the last 4 years is we had a panic button moment when we all went home. Our organizations, our policies, our systems were not set up to do this. So a lot of this right now is we are now living in the Band-Aid era. And now we're going to have to undo some of those Band-Aids and make these new ways of working sustainable, scalable, and sufficient.
Yeah, if I can just jump in and add on that, I mean, I totally agree. And what COVID did was create a huge sense of urgency, right? We had to solve that problem and everyone came together. But unfortunately, with other types of digital transformation initiatives, that's not always the case. A lot of times there's a lot of fear in the transformation, how it's going to affect my job. Let's say we're implementing some form of AI strategy. Well, is this going to cause layoffs in the customer service department? So a big part of getting people um, to collaborate and work together to develop and embrace these new processes is to understand that. And this is where the compassion, D, I should say, ties in. Be compassionate of people's fears, because people don't know how this thing is going to affect them. You know, if we're putting it in the broader sense of a big digital transformation initiative. So, in understanding people's fears, communicating to people so and engaging them and making them part of the transformation is always the best thing. And that goes with developing the processes as well.
And let me follow on to that. And Becky, I want to put you back in the hot seat there for a minute. As you're planning the work for a transformation, you're going to work with an organization to do a transformation. What steps do you take to ensure that the culture, and therefore the people, can not only absorb the changes required, but can also become advocates for them? Because that's what we all really want, right? Changes are a lot easier if they get pulled through the organization rather than driven through the organization, I think.
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
I think self-awareness is really critical in this. A lot of organizations, and even me myself in leadership roles and in the past, and then sitting down one-on-one with some folks and finding out that the reality is very different than what my perception was from the leadership chair. All of these different things, right? We tend to lack some real self-awareness in terms of what our actual culture is. And as a part of that culture, what our level of change resilience is. And it's that change resilience that's really, really critical. Culture is, of course, important for so many things, and culture first organizations that are focused on making sure that we are nurturing those environments that keep people happy and productive are very critical. But that is not the indicator. It is the change resilience that is the big indicator to how our people are going to be able to navigate this change with us. And one of the major things that we can do to ensure that the people are understanding and ready of what's to come is all of the things that we've talked about already, which is communicating to them why this matters, how it's going to change our business for the better, and why we need to go through this transformation. But then do much more listening and observing than talking. Take a step back, go sit down. I have said this 19 million times in my career, and I'm going to say it 100 million more times. Sit down next to an employee and watch them do their job for one day. And your mind will be blown as a leader to all of the things that they do that you had no idea. Why? Because what I said, people, process, and technology is oversimplified. It's also a lot of words on a piece of paper for most organizations, and the reality of it being implemented is vastly different in production environments, on the floor, in the hands of the people that are actually using the systems, are operating within these processes, functioning within this culture. The reality is vastly different than what, especially as leaders, most of us understand as what's happening in our operational footprints. And so that's the big thing here, is really understanding, what does their job actually look like? We can make every assumption under the sun based off of our perception of the culture, on what their appetite for change and change resilience is. But then when you watch them do their job, and you watch the 17 systems they interacted with in 60 seconds, and 7 of them you have never yourself touched, you're going to start to be looking at things a little bit differently. And again, back to that ecosystem, what are we actually trying to transform? Is it a specific process? Is it a specific experience? Is it a specific system? And I think when we start to, as an organization, understand why digital transformations fail, it's usually because we're going too broad. What are we focusing on here? What are the success metrics? Let's start to test that with our people doing the actual work and go, here's what we're working to transform. Here are some of the KPIs we're working to hit. Talk to us about what things might look like from your chair. Or we are talking about undergoing this change. What kinds of things come to mind for you? What would you recommend I look at next? And these sorts of conversations not only humanize them and the work that they do, but it helps us understand the nuances of being a human in our environments. And we often are just much too focused on the process and the technology, in terms of, we're going to turn it on, the light's going to be green, and everything is going to be great. And it's not. And we know this. We have never, I don't know about you guys, but I have never seen an implementation go 100% according to plan. But we can plan for change. We can conduct really robust change management and build towards that change resiliency. And that starts with planning, with understanding how they work, communicating with them, with what we're going to consider a successful outcome, and start to reverse engineer from that. But if we don't know what a successful outcome is, we have no business doing a digital transformation. We have to know what we're working towards and design backwards with the business along for the ride. Digital transformation also can't be done in a tech vacuum, in the IT vacuum, right? We need the people along for the ride. So those are a couple of the things, is that it has to be a pool of folks, not just those that are going to own the tech and implement it perhaps, but those that are using it, have their hands in it every single day, and then really starting to benchmark and indicate where we're going to fumble on change management or overall change resilience if we don't start to plan and prepare them for this change. So those are a couple of things, and we could have an hour-long conversation about change management and preparing humans for change if we wanted to, but that's the really big part. And a lot of employees, when you temperature check them, and again, most of the organizations I've worked with, they feel very blindfolded in terms of, what are we actually working towards here? And when we take those blindfolds off, here is our hypothesis. Here's the goal we're working towards. And this is why we are implementing these systems and taking this part of the organization through this transformation. Talk to us. Do you think that this feels on point? Do you think that there's something we're missing? And a lot of times they're going to be throwing fruitful insights at us that we wouldn't have indicated otherwise. But the two best things you can do is sit next to sit next to somebody that is working in the systems for a day, watch them work, experience how they work, experience what their role, their job, their day feels like. That's so impactful. And I've seen so many leaders never do that. And then the second one is really roundtable and starting to pool together their insights. A lot of times we talk about employee engagement, employee satisfaction, employee feedback. Just give them a forum. Don't overthink it. Give them a forum and say, tell us some of these places that you think we should be looking at. And it's just always more fruitful than we plan for if we just don't necessarily overplan something that can be simple in nature. Get folks talking and get that conversation documented so that we can start to leverage and react to it and not do that after the fact when there's a lot of frustrated folks.
So you covered a tremendous amount of ground there, Becky. Thank you.
Too much.
Did you have a bagel along the way is my question.
I had a bagel yesterday, but not today.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. There's a reason I asked that question. Maybe we'll get a chance to talk about that later. But there's a good question from John Acuna there. How does benefits realization management and value creation fit into a digital transformation initiative? I feel a lack of understanding of the differences between objectives, outcomes, and benefits, and value, as well as clear definitions of why, what, and how we want to achieve is key. And this is something I think we all come back to over and over again. And Becky, you talked about, my mantras is ask the people who do the work. It's the Gemba walk. It's getting out, sitting down with people, watching what they do. And I always think of something that somebody said after a fairly good sized upgrade in some software, enterprise software at one organization. And the person who was in charge of the IT service desk said their first call was somebody on the phone saying, yesterday I knew how to do my job. Today I don't. And it's sometimes it comes down to being that fundamental. So how is it that we do these things over and over again? We talk about making changes and implementations and building new processes and installing new software and all of these things, but we seem to miss the fundamentals of understanding what we're trying to achieve, figuring out where the value is going to come from, what are the real benefits we're looking for. To John hit the nail on the head there on a bunch of things, and it's a huge question. So, David, you're the process guy. Why do we keep doing this to ourselves? Why do we jump into solutions before we analyze where we're actually going?
I remember this quote from Gartner, and it's probably a little dated because I uncovered it maybe 15, 20 years ago, but it went something like, after 50 years of project management, of implementing systems with all of the methodologies and all of the practices, 75% of projects still fail. And you're asking a question that, there's a lot of reasons why. I think too many times we let the IT group lead these initiatives. And an IT group is very good at the black and white of systems and understanding the technology, but do a horrible job at the people side of things. And I have this picture in my mind. We talk about the stool. You brought the stool up before. It's not a stool. It's 3 pogo sticks. Someone's bouncing people, someone's bouncing on technology, and someone's bouncing on process. And they're not talking to each other. They're absolutely not talking to each other, because I don't know how many implementations I've been involved with where we sit down and gather requirements, user stories, requirements, business requirements, technical requirements, and we go hand them off to the developer, and we find that what they're doing is sitting down with somebody. How did it look in the old system? What were those drop down? And they do a lift and shift of the old process right into the new technology with no value add, no benefits gain or anything. To take a phrase from Simon Sinek, it starts with the why. Why are you doing this, right? And the why is different for everybody. Like why the The why for the CEO is maybe cost savings. The why for the guy on the service desk is productivity or efficiency. The why for an implementer is, less rework for the same initiative. And we tend to look at it one way. So we'll come out and we'll tell all of the benefits of this project from the CEO's perspective, which doesn't resonate with the people doing the work because they can't make that connection between, let's say profitability and how it's impacting their job today. So I think a lot of it is to do with the wrong people, or because they're digital transformation initiatives, they tend to be led by IT. And I don't think that's the case. And also people not working together, having those 3 pogo sticks as opposed to a balanced stool, I think is where I've seen most of the failures occur from.
Spot on, David. I think that's absolutely spot on. And the why is usually rather simple, right? We need to become more efficient. We need to find cost savings. We found specific processes where our leakage is absurdly high, right? All of these different things, communicate that. It's right. And then that becomes our core and our pillar and our North Star. And of course, we want to be creating really great customer and employee experiences along the way. But a lot of times, as businesses, we have a duty to deliver certain outcomes, and those whys are rather simple. And we are the ones that murky and cloud them because we're trying to boil the ocean when typically it's, well, process C is wildly ineffective and we need to fix process C. Right. And then we are starting to create these parameters that set us up for success. And it's the lack of parameters where digital transformation go wild and ultimately fumble.
Interesting. Doris got a great comment. It has to start with why. We all know that saying, or we know the saying and maybe not the practice of starting with why, if you're just tackling along with me here. And what better, faster, cheaper needs to be better for the people and more so than the companies delivering the service or products. And that's something I've seen in my experience over and over again too, is that there's a why, but nobody gets it except maybe the board of directors and the
There's
C-suite.
many ways.
Yeah.
If I can just interject, I saw something this morning that I think relates to this, and it's pretty. So I was watching this video on AI, and there's a lot of fear in this world about AI and the implications of it and how it's going to affect you. And they were interviewing the CEO of a company who just laid off 90% of the service desk, and they asked the person, well, don't you think that's a problem? And I think it was a Freudian slip, because what he said was, it is if you think of it in human terms. And wow, like,
Oh.
yeah, sure. If you think about it in human terms, yeah, it's devastating. But he said this was great for the company. And wow, if that was the mantra at the beginning of that digital transformation, we're going to do it because we want to eliminate all of these folks because the AI will do it better, faster, cheaper. You're not going to get a lot of support for that. That's for sure.
Yeah. I think a lot of times too, and so I like to use metaphors because it gets us all on the same page, right? And so I was using this metaphor a couple weeks ago that I really like. And so especially to this comment of it has to be better for the people as well, right? And sometimes we just forget that we need to communicate that and that outcome, that benefit is there. But so this is an example that I like to use, and I just think that it resonates. I live in a really old house. I live in a 103-year-old house. And imagine, because it was built 103 years ago, and when, largely insulation, I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So insulation is very important up here, right? But back then, insulation was newspapers. And now we have the technology to appropriately insulate our homes. And so a couple of things. So creating an appetite for change, right? We can't use newspapers anymore. There's great new technology, and it's going to be a change and it's going to come at a cost. But if we implement it, here are the benefits, right? And from a homeownership perspective, my heating retainment increases by 80%, right? I am able to heat my home perhaps for 60% cost reduction. But the outcome is I'm creating comfort. I'm not cold in my home. I am creating a well-heated environment for the people in my home. And I am creating that environment at a cost reduction. So I know it's a very kind of dorky metaphor, but right, if the technology has changed, and if we make the investment, the time, the resource investment in this, we not only gain this comfort, but we're going to be able to remain in this comfort zone, in this heated home for 60% less. And so starting to build that narrative is really important, instead of just going, we're going to implement this new technology because we need to save 60% cost savings. But the actual benefit, the realized benefit here is I'm going to have a much more well-heated home, right? So just again, thinking about it in that way, right? Because there's a lot of benefits that we can extend. But when we humanize it, and what is the actual benefit we're working towards? It is that comfort. It's the heat and the comfort. And we're going to get there by going through this process. So I like to use that as a metaphor, because absolutely, Nora, that is the thing. But a lot of times that benefit is there. We just aren't good at communicating it, aren't good at articulating it, and getting the body and seeing that endpoint.
Well, I would just add to that and say there's actually multiple benefits, because, you know, to the person paying the bills, that cost saving is the number one benefit. To the kids living in the house, is having a nice warm place to play. So the benefits, there can be a variety of benefits, and it's communicating them in a language that the different stakeholders understand, and not try to have this one solution fits all type of approach to describing the benefits.
Mhm.
And this comes up again and again and again. And one of the places it tends to be overlooked, in my view, is in relationship to customers. Let's say there's a birthday coming for a 6-year-old girl, and dad says, time to get a nice bicycle. And he goes to the bicycle store and he picks out a bicycle that happens to be green, and gets the bicycle all wrapped up for the birthday. They unwrap the bicycle, and the girl doesn't like it because it's not pink. She wanted a pink bicycle. So who's the real customer? Is it the person who goes to the store, or is it the person who's going to use it? And I think we, in that distinction, that ITIL distinction between customers and end users, sometimes the importance of that, who's actually doing this, again, going back to asking the people who do the work, sitting down next to them, doing the Gemba walk, going around, listening. Maybe we can put that comment from John Thorpe back up, because this is really interesting. We have to understand the why by talking with people, not just talking to them. And I think that's something that's come up again and again and again here, is in this interplay among the people, the process, and the technology, as we're going to make moves and do new things and do a transformation of any kind. It's getting that conversation going that is exceedingly important. And by the way, just as a side note, right after this, I am definitely getting my animation software going and doing some people on pogo sticks. So this is kind of, we can do a quick round robin here. We're in now the age of AI. It's come up already on this conversation. We can't sit down and have a conversation anywhere in business today without the AI coming up. Does the job of balancing people, process, and technology, and all the other elements that go in here, change with the advent of AI technologies like generative AI? Is the people side still the core of the triangle? Are we still, because there's a lot of places where people may not play any role.
Yeah.
So how does that shift the conversation of the people, process, and technology, and the other associated complications, as Becky has pointed out? What do you think? Dee?
Well, I think I keep coming back to the word communication, and thinking that communication for some people, and I'm sure you've all seen this, is an event. I sent the email, I told her, I called her, I whatevered, and it's not a back and forth interaction, as the commenter was saying. People talk at people. I've had managers say, well, I sent her the email. Well, it's communication in itself is not an event. It's a process. It's a back and forth process of confirming that you were understood, of creating an environment where people can say, well, not only that you create the opportunity, like you said, Becky, by sitting down next to people and providing that comfort level where they know they can say, let me just bring this up. If you don't provide that in your culture, it doesn't matter what your other processes are, and your culture is not what you put on your wall, and it's not what you say it is. It's what people feel, whether it's the customer or the employee or whoever. You were saying, David, that 75% of projects fail, according to some data, and people fail too. But almost always, when I have drilled down to a project that was faltering or failed, or a situation where literally people were in court, you can drill down and back and back and back and back. And there's a moment or an opportunity where a communication missed. The connection did not happen. And so someone misinterpreted a look or a word, or somebody thought somebody knew something, or somebody perceived it a certain way because there was no checks and balances. I think the scariest word for a leader to go out and ask, but it's so important, is to say, how are things going? And then shut up and sit down and listen, and then respond. Because, well, like you were saying, Becky, a lot of companies will do, or you alluded to, people will do satisfaction surveys, they used to call them, or engagement surveys. And then the first thing that you see them do is sit down in the boardroom and say, well, that's not accurate, and that's not accurate, and they think this because of that. But they don't go out and have the sit down sessions and drill down and ask the people, okay, we saw this on this survey, what? And then ask the people, what does this mean? Because when you ask a question, it's only the beginning of a communication process. And all of these processes we do should reflect and support what the business is about. If you drill down on a business, the purpose of any business ultimately is people. The purpose of everything we do is people. Whether we're building a car, whether we're building an AI, whatever it is, and those things are meant to serve us and create. Supposedly, a lot of this was to create more time so that we could interact more
Yeah.
in a real way, right? Take away the mundane stuff, provide consistency, so we didn't have to worry about things that repeat themselves. But somehow we just keep jamming more in, and the people just. I love that what you said, Becky, about, oh, it just affects the humans. Was that you, Becky? It said, we just that was you, David, that we laid off, 90 people. Yeah, it's just the humans. And then don't get me started on some human resource people. I mean, there's no human in there. One more thing I'd like to say is the one size fits all approach. There has never been, and there never will be, two identical humans on this planet, ever. And even who I am today is not who I am tomorrow. So it is a continual process of connecting with each other and seeing, okay, I knew you yesterday, but who are you today? No two identical people. So how do you deal with that? Well, there's a system and a process to compassion too, because it's a communication technique. And it involves that very first step, listening. I just think sometimes people are afraid to listen because they don't want to know what people are going to say. They don't know how to respond to it.
Down the lines of what you were saying about compassion, I think taking a step back, artificial intelligence has grown a lot of tentacles. And most folks will agree there's 7 core areas of artificial intelligence, but the span of AI is vast. And it is a blanket term that holds very little meaning in the reality of things, because it could mean 9,000 different things to 9,000 different people. So when we're talking about digital transformation or leveraging terminology like AI or automation in our workplaces, and understanding that that can trigger for a lot of people a sense of worry or insecurity, because how is this going to impact my livelihood, my job, my position, my future here, etc. Qualify what we mean by artificial intelligence and how we plan to leverage it. Most of us use artificial intelligence just about every minute of the day, right? Spell check is artificial intelligence.
Then there's me.
And so we are no longer, stuck, spelling our own words correctly, right? But the big thing here too is communicating to them the value of it, how we plan to leverage it, and how we're going to involve them. And I like to use specific examples, but from an operational standpoint, when we're going in and we're looking at use cases for artificial intelligence, a lot of times that means that we are looking at processes where we can reduce 12 clicks per workflow. And those 12 clicks added up per person, per day, per year is a lot of cost savings. We are not looking to remove this role. We're looking to simplify it so that they can focus on the high value work. And a lot of that underlying message is you as the human are valuable to us. We want you focused on the valuable work. We want to make your life easier. So we also, as leaders, as technologists, as digital transformation managers, we have to be very careful on how we're using language like that, because we have to qualify it. We cannot make assumptions on what everybody's understanding or go to kind of qualifying process of AI is. So that's the biggest thing I think that everybody can nip in the bud is when we say AI, it could mean 1,000 things. Right? You can be using it in so many different ways. It is not we're not releasing the robots through the halls. We are looking at leveraging technology intelligently in specific ways that are here to make your life easier and our business more efficient.
Yesterday, I saw a post on X, and it's brilliant. From a woman who happens to be a writer. She's an author. And she said, I don't want AI to do the drawing and the writing. I want AI to do the stupid stuff so I can do the drawing and the writing. And I think a lot of it right now is misdirected, which is a whole conversation in itself. But you're absolutely right, Becky. There's machine learning, there's natural language processing, there's all these different aspects of what we blanketly call AI, and it's going to have multiple effects. It's going to ripple across every business everywhere and do a lot of nice things as well as maybe not some nice things. And then that's going to be sorted out as we go forward. If we have to kind of start winding the conversation down, but David, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah. So the AI thing, I think AI is we had agriculture, we had the Renaissance, we had the Industrial Revolution. We're at the fourth Industrial Revolution now. AI is going to change things more significantly than anything we've seen in the past. And I think most people don't even know the extent of the implications. Unfortunately, most businesses are looking at AI as a productivity tool. And sure, I've said it 1,000 times, free up people. Automation frees up people to do things, more value-added things. But if those people happen to be the ones in the service desk, maybe there'll be 5 people doing the job of 100. So there are societal issues here that are immense. And I'm not sure anybody's really looking at it because AI is accelerating at an exponential rate. What it's doing today is 5 times better than what it did last year. And it's going to be 100 times better next. I mean, I saw an avatar recently that was almost indistinguishable from a human being in terms of the way they looked to you in the eyes and the way they communicated. So, so there's a lot of fear around it. So in terms of this whole thing, I think both Dee and Becky, talked about the fear that can come and alleviating people's fears, but there's some real fears to be had here. It's like, and I think AI is going to do tremendous things. I don't think we can solve half the problems on this planet without that power of an AI, but what is it going to do? I sometimes I feel like a buggy whip, in the days of the horse and carriage. I mean, are we ever, where are the buggy whips today? You got to think that, right? And I think leadership should really be spending more time in their strategy, understanding what the implications of AI are on the organization, and really be able to communicate, the direction. And I don't think that's happening enough.
Thank you. Thank you, David, for that thought. And as we wind up today's digital dialogue, I have to greatly thank Dee Burgoyne and David Mainville and Becky Roman for being here today, for contributing really, really good thoughts and interesting thoughts, complex thoughts to the conversation. Thanks so much for your participation. It was great to have you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for joining our digital dialogue. Be sure to join our next digital dialogue on the first and third Tuesdays of every month.